Welcome to the MAM journals. The more observant amongst you will have noticed that in our title photo we didn't actually include the fact that this is a KTM, but you took one look at it and you knew that already. It's a very distinctive bike and look. KTM is an Austrian company and it was founded in 1934, so it's 90th anniversary this year. And KTM stands for, the K was the initial of the initial investor, the T was the initial of the founder of the company, and M was the initial of the place in which they were actually built. KTM have a great sporting heritage, and last time I looked, they'd won, I think it was nearly 100 motocross world titles and over 100 enduro championships. Nowadays, as well as having off-road capability and prowess, they've also, of course, in road racing, and at the very pinnacle of the sport with the Red Bull team racing in MotoGP. They've actually hold the record for the fastest ever recorded speed of a MotoGP bike in official timings and practice, and that was Brad Binder last year at Mugello, which is where they normally go the fastest, and he did 227 miles an hour. So clearly they know how to build the odd bike. This is the first KTM that I've actually covered on the channel, and when I'm sort of researching and thinking about bikes and talking about manufacturers' products, and I do like to do a bit of background and sort of understand their scale and where they've come from and where they're going. And if I said to you that in 2023 Honda did 18.5 million bikes, that'll give you one starting point. And then BMW did 209,000 bikes, a record for them. Triumph did 98,000 bikes. Have a guess at how many KTMs were sold last year. Hopefully you've got a figure in your mind as you think about that. And if I tell you they did 280,000 bikes, it might begin to give you an idea of scale. But that, of course, is not the end of it. KTM are what's known in corporate terms as a consolidator. They buy other brands. They own Husqvarna, they own CF Moto, they own Gas, they own MV Augusta, and they own some other businesses as well. If you totaled up their sales for 2023, it's just over 380,000 bikes. This is no small cottage industry. This is a big global company. Today, we're going to be reviewing the 990 Duke. It's part of a family of Dukes, including the 790 and all the way up to the 1390. I'll be doing what I normally do. I'll be going through the specifications of the bike, I'll taking it for a ride, and then I'll come back and come to some sort of conclusion. I do hope you enjoy the video. I always like to start with the engine. I think it's the heart of any motorcycle. Well, without an engine, it's a push bike, which you won't find me reviewing anytime soon. This is fitted with a 947cc. They helpfully tell you it's LC8C, which stands for liquid cooled 8 valves compact. It's actually the same name as the previous engine, but obviously it is significantly different. It's a parallel twin, as indeed were its predecessors. It produces 121 horsepower, or if you think in PS, 123, and it produces that at 9,500. It also produces, for me, a good number, 103 Newton meters of torque at 6,750. Now, 121 isn't exactly earth-shattering power on a modern bike. If we just pan round, there's actually two bikes there. There's a Honda SP1 and an SP2, and the SP1 produces 122 at the back wheel, and the SP2 produces 126 at the back wheel, and those bikes are 24 and 22 years old respectively. So I'll say not massive, but I think the characteristics of the bike and the fact that it is very light, it weighs well, the headline news, they says it's 179 kilos, which is 395 pounds, but that's before you've actually put any fuel in it. So it's actually 419 pounds fully fueled, but that is quite a light bike. Okay, so starting at the front of the bike, it is fitted with 43mm WP Apex front forks, and they've actually got adjustments on them in terms of compression and rebound. You can see on there, and we'll put some photographs on there just to show the other one as well. It's interesting. A while ago they started putting them so that each fork, one had compression, one had rebound, but they act as a unit, which I found a bit of an alien concept, but I've ridden enough bikes with it done now and I know it works. The wheel here is, that's a 17-inch wheel. It's got a 120/70 profile. It's actually got Bridgestone S22s on, which I'm actually a fan of. I haven't ridden this bike in the wet, but I have actually ridden, I think it was a Suzuki Hayabusa which had them on, and it was probably the fastest I've ever been in the wet, but the less said about that, probably the better. And you can see here it's fitted with radial brakes. I think these are the same as the previous model, and not only is it radial there, it's also radial up here, look, with it going straight in, so master cylinder radial as well. They're good brakes. I don't talk about when we go for a ride, but certainly did everything that I wanted to do. I think that wheel is actually the same as on the 1390 Super Duke. It looks the same, but feel free, correct me if I'm wrong. And as you can see, it cleaned up nicely again, which I'll touch on a bit later. The bike is fitted with cornering ABS, which suggests to me that it's got a 6-axis IMU. I've talked about that in other videos, and for me it's a useful characteristic. And finally, at the front end here, it's got a 24.2 degree rake, so that's quite sharpish in terms of its dimensions. Going to the rear of the bike, it's again 17-inch wheel, and that's got fitted with 180/55s, so good sporty profile. This is a 240mm disc. It's a twin piston caliper, and obviously again cornering ABS. It's got this, I'll call it white power. They call them WPs now, but they used to, when they first came out, I think it was in the late 70s, I think it was a Dutch company, and they were quite well associated with off-road racing. And the reason why they call white power, I'm a mine of absolutely useless information, is because the guy who actually owned the company found somebody who could do the powder coating, and their main business was making hospital beds, so they only had white. So that is how they ended up with that very distinctive white power WP look. In terms of adjustment on that, obviously you've got preload adjustment on here. Let's just go and have a wander around the other side. There's just a couple of things I want to show you in here on this white power shock. You can see it has actually got rebound adjustment on that, which again is a flathead screwdriver. You can adjust it. I didn't feel any need to adjust it as I go. White power, by the way, or WP as they're called, is actually now, I think, majority owned by KTM. Other things I want to show you on here, this is the gearbox. I don't talk about it much when we go out for a ride, but this is actually a quick shifter. That's an optional extra. I did actually try and get on the configurator with KTM, but I lost the will to live, to be honest, and I'm not sure how much that costs, but that isn't included as standard, but it's a nice good gearbox capable. Other thing I want to show you while we're around here is actually how easy a bike to clean is quite actually important to me. And you can see I've sort of left a bit there to show you. This cloth has got nothing on it, it's just a cloth, and it won't work now, of course, but if you just rub it, it comes off absolutely easily. Cleaned up really well, these wheels, and indeed the whole bike did. I think it's if I had this bike, if it was my own, and I got in one of my OCD modes and locked myself into the garage, I think I could get this really gleaming. It's come up very nicely, just what it is after the hundreds of miles that I've ridden on it. Other things while we're around the back here, you can that wheel can't be the same as the R90 Duke, because the R90 Duke's got a single-sided swinging arm, while this has obviously got a double-sided. I'm not sure what that's made of. Somebody might know. And then if I go up here, this rear subframe up here, this is cast aluminium. Nice finish, nicely done, and will help with the weight. Okay, if we just sort of stand back and have a look at it and get the overall feel for the dimensions, the wheelbase, i.e. the contact points of the tyres, is 1481 millimetres. So that's actually quite short. You combine that with a rake, you'll get a feel for what this bike will do. It's 825 millimetre seat. I talk about that when we go for a ride. The tank is 14.8 litres, which if you think in old money is 3.2 something imperial gallons. I'll talk about range on that when we go out, but it isn't what they think it is. Aesthetics, well, this is certainly a bike that divided opinions with my friends because I often go out for a ride and catch up with friends as well, and the first things, I sort of point them at the bike and say, well, what do you think? And I got various comments, sort of distinct, different, striking, and then I got comments that were less positive, which for the sake of decency I'm going to put in a box called visually challenged. So it definitely wasn't everybody's cup of tea. Actually, it's funny, I was probably in the sort of latter camp, really, initially, not being very familiar with the range, but having ridden the bike, it is a very distinct bike. It's got a lot of character, and I can sort of understand why they'd want to make it look different as well. It's sort of in keeping with what the bike is and what it does. So the more I look at it, the more I like it, because I know what it rides like. Coming to the top of the bike, and we'll talk through some of the technology available. I'm not going to be exhaustive in it for two reasons. One, I'm not sure that everybody actually wants to know all the ins and outs of how this works. And secondly, I'm fairly new to the new technology on KTM, so I'm beginning to learn it as I go, and I'll enjoy the journey as I test more and more of the bikes. It starts over here on the right hand side. That's all that sort of side does, really. Over here as your main controls for your dash, your cruise control, which has got an interesting button under here, which is resuming and setting by, you can see it's moving there. And I'll go into the dash here. This is it's nice, clear, simple, visually, 5-inch TFT, and it works really well when you're out on the road. You have got adjustability as you go. It's not quite as intuitive as some of the other systems that I've come across, but as I say, I've got to be fair, familiarity, once you get into it, I suspect you would know exactly what's going on. So you pop in, you've got you've got modes here, and if I start cursoring down, let's see if I can get it to do something. Right, you've got ride mode. Now this has actually got 3 modes as standard and 2 modes which they've taken optional. Performance is one of the optional ones. So if I go in there, and again, if I just cursor down, you can see I can go to Sport, which is standard, Street, which is standard, Rain, which is standard, and Track, which is an optional extra. Now, if I then press into Track, you can see you've got slip adjuster, which I did sort of faff about with as we went on, but I'll talk about more when we go. Throttle response, and whoops, I've left it in Track. You've got anti-wheelie, very low. Can't imagine who selected that. Launch control, I didn't actually try it. I always think they're a bit tough on clutches. It's not my bike, and if I owned one, I definitely would be playing with that. ABS mode, You can see that the way that I've got it, this is called Supermoto. So in other words, I've turned off the back ABS just in case it wanted to slide around a bit. Of course it didn't, and I certainly wouldn't film it if it did. You've then got additional controls on this, and then whether you want your quick shifter on or not. Very straightforward. Back out again, keep going, and you can see I'm in track visuals, so it's giving you all sorts of additional information in a different way, lean angles, and you can set a timer up for that if you want to do it on a track. I think this would be a great bike on a track if that's the way that you want to ride and you want to do it. Back out of the sort of track options and back onto the normal screen. This is the normal screen that you're seeing, and as I say, very straightforward, very useful, more sophisticated than you think. You can get connectivity to apps and things like that. Like most manufacturers, KTM do one, so you can do maps and phones and various other things. I haven't tried with it, but if anybody has and wants to make a comment on how effective it is, please feel free. You know, it's always good to hear from owners. I hope I've given you some feel for the controls and the technology available. Let's do the best bit. Let's go for a ride. Looking at the website, the bike is on some called the Sniper. Well, it's certainly shot down some of my perceptions. One of which is that all KTMs require a stepladder to get on. Some clearly do, but this 990 with its 825mm seat height was very easy to get onto. I am 172 centimetres tall, which is, if you think in old money, just under 5'8", and with a 29.5-inch inside leg, I had good foot contact on either side. The handlebar, seat and footpeg ergonomics were for me verging on perfect. I felt at home and in control almost immediately. I do find it interesting that some bikes never quite fit. Some you sort of grow into as you get used to them, and others feel like old friends the minute you get on. This is definitely the latter. The bike feels light and manoeuvrable, the engine responsive and powerful. There's nothing in front of you other than the single instrument, which is clear and easy to read. This bike is balanced and precise, just right in a busy car park. This is actually the Super Sausage Cafe near Towcester. It's a good stop if you're in the area. These slow speed handling characteristics make it an easy bike to filter on in traffic, and the bike copes with the increasingly frequent 20 and 30 mile an hour limits in second, third or fourth as you see fit. Part of the way that I review bikes is what I call ordinary conditions, and this bike is perfectly comfortable chugging along in 50, 60 and 70 mile an hour limit roads, as well as in town. You could commute on it. Whilst I'm doing this, it's a good opportunity to walk towards another one of my perceptions, and that is that KTMs are not entirely reliable. Although my experience of KTMs is limited, I think it's only right that I say that the bikes that I have ridden, including this one, have performed faultlessly. My perception is mainly based by social media forums, which on the 790 and 880 include some negative comments about premature wear on cams and some fluid and oil leaks. Some owners are clearly pretty annoyed about this, and they are vocal. Others say that their bikes have been fine. The MCN, Motorcycle News, rider surveys do score these bikes highly, 4 out of 5 overall, but reliability they scored 3 out of 5, so clearly there are some issues. On a more positive note, when researching for the video, I called a friend who I knew had had 10 KTM Enduro bikes. I've actually known him for years, and we did do a bit of enduroing together. And I know for a fact that he's broken at least 2 Hondas, and I was actually behind him when he detonated a TM400. He does maintain his bikes well, but he doesn't spare the horses. He described his
10 KTMs as absolutely faultless, and frankly, if James can't destroy one, they're probably indestructible. Different bikes and different engines, of course, but evidence, at least to me, that KTM can make some pretty tough bikes. I do think overall there can be some issues with the bike, but any suggestions that all KTMs self-destruct is clearly over-egged. Anyway, back to the road test. Anyone consistently riding this KTM at these sort of speeds will have bought a pretty big hammer for a very small nail. The bike is designed to press on. The engine has excellent mid-range torque, a fantastic chassis and a good gearbox. I love the bike in 4th and 5th gear. It's a proper point and squirt bike, quite mechanical and gives you a lot of feedback. It is not the least bit concerned with rippled, bumpy and damaged surfaces, and nor is it particularly fussy about what gear you're in. If my obviously theoretical calculations are correct, 4th gear is happy between 30 and 100 miles per hour, and according to MCN, apparently the bike has a top speed of 125 miles per hour, although Bike Magazine estimates it at 145 miles an hour. Fact is, I don't know what number is true. To my mind, this bike isn't actually about top speed. Light, agile, and with 103 newton meters of torque at 6,750 revs, it is about mid-range grunt and corners. I did actually find myself tempering my enthusiasm, attempting and accepting that I was never going to get anywhere near the capability of this bike on the road. With more predictable one-way traffic, surfaces and no speed limits, which sounds like a track day to me, you could explore the real potential of this bike. I am an average rider and I suspect the bike could cope with anything that I ask of it comfortably, although on a track day it would get swamped down the straights, certainly in factory spec. For ultimate speed and probably acceleration, I suspect the 1390 is the weapon of choice. I hope to try one later this year. As standard, the bike has 3 modes: Sport, Street and Rain. This one also had the optional performance and track selections. I did try them. Street and Sport felt pretty similar to me, but Rain is definitely less power and significantly softer delivery. Funnily enough, I didn't spend much time there. Performance mode facilitated the adjustment of some of the electronics, and the more I rode the bike, the more I adjusted it, mostly turning things down. I think I ended up with track throttle, no ABS at the back, no anti-wheelie control, and reduced slip cover. These are probably not the exactly right technical words, but I was adjusting it with the graphics on as my guide. Works well. This bike is fun. As a mature rider, you could probably lose 20 years riding it, but you might also lose your licence and your no claims bonus on your insurance. Back to the practical stuff. KTM claim the bike does 60 miles per gallon and therefore has a theoretical range of 195 miles. I got nothing like that. I filled it twice and think I got between 160 and 165 out of a tank. That, if my calculations are right, it's about 50 miles to the gallon, but if I owned one of these, it would probably be even less than that. The only way I would get 60 is if I pushed it for the last 10. This is a naked bike, and although it could cruise all day at 75 miles an hour, and indeed this one has cruise control, but I didn't use it. I do use cruise control quite regularly on my bikes, but it didn't feel like that sort of a bike. This bike is not designed as a sort of detached, comfortable tourer. I am sure KTM make better bikes than this for that. This is a bike for the blast and the bends, and it is really good at what it does.
So how did I get on? Well, I enjoy riding all sorts of bikes, some of which I don't have any intention of buying, or they're not my sort of bike, but I still enjoy the experience. And I particularly like riding bikes that challenge my perceptions and change my views. And I particularly enjoyed riding this. I didn't really consider a KTM as a bike that I would ever consider. And having ridden one and experienced it, I think I've changed my view. I think the bike is really easy to ride. It's really dynamic, it's engaging, it's pretty brisk, and it handles exceptionally well. So are there any downsides? Well, I think there's probably a couple I just want to sort of walk towards and talk about, and one is the price. In my head, I had these bikes at about sort of £10,000-ish. I'll sort of take a little bit. So I was a bit surprised that it was £13,000. KTM have a very different model for a lot of manufacturers in the world. And what they tend to do is they make bikes, they work out how many they're going to make, they ship them out to the dealers, and they see if they sell. If they sell them all, then that's great. If they don't, because they evolve their models very quickly, they do tend to have an end of year bonus scheme where they're actually actively going in the market and saying, and they knock thousands off. So if you're buying a bike and you've paid quite a strong price in the first place, and they then discount it by £1,000 plus, then that can have an impact on residual values. And some people get a bit concerned about that. But frankly, if you buy your bikes on PCP, i.e. a finance package where you have a monthly payment, well, you just take it for 3 years, hand it back at the end, and what the residual does is not your problem, it's theirs. But if you actually write checks, you might have a slightly different view. And I think if you were actually writing a check for a bike, and that's how I buy my bikes because I don't like the idea of finance, but we're all different, I think one of the strategies you might actually adopt in buying one of these is wait to the end of the year and buy the one that you like when they've decided, if they've still got some left, of course, because that is the risk, that you actually want to do it. So price was one of my concerns. Second, one of my, if you like, slight concerns is this bit about reliability. And it wouldn't put me off buying one of these, that some people have had problems, but I think it would make me a bit careful about where I bought it. And personally, well, not surprisingly, I would go to Premier Bikes and go, come on, what deals are available? And let's see if we can do something, because I'd want to have dealer support knowing that I've got the full manufacturer's warranty when I've bought the bike. I think the fact that I'm even talking and thinking about that tells you how much I enjoyed riding this bike. Now, if you've got one of these and you've got one of these, I have to say, I think you may get a completely illogical and uncontrollable urge to do this. Because if you didn't, you might have missed the point. I do hope that you've enjoyed the video, and if you did, you might be kind enough to press like or even consider subscribing to the channel. But as is always the case, whatever you do, ride safe, stay well.